Hi everyone and welcome to my channel. Today we're going to be making the Catalina handbag by Rosa. I have altered mine a little bit. I will be omitting the card slots along with the zipper pocket. I'm just going to be putting a slip pocket inside my bag. I want to keep this video as short as possible because I do know that there are other YouTubers that are also releasing the more in-detailed tutorial. So I will link those channels in the description box below so that you can go and check out how to do the zipper pocket along with the card slots, which I do plan on making another one of these. More than likely I'll probably do a live one, but for this one I'm just going to keep it really short and simple. So I have my main panels right here. So you have your interior and your exterior. My interior is going to be waterproof canvas, so it's not interfaced at all. However, for my exterior, I am using a leather. So I decided to only put 2 layers of Soap Use Plus on my exterior panels. I find that it gives it a really nice structure to it, just because leather is kind of already thick to begin with. I did skive my edges on my pieces. I have my zipper panels, which I also have just 1 layer of Soap Use Plus on my zipper panels right here. And then I have the waterproof canvas. I have my gusset for both my exterior and my interior. And then instead of using leather for my straps, I'm going to be using this really pretty strap rubbing that I have on my website. So I'm going to be using that. And then hardware, I'm also going to be using the hardware for my website. So I have 2 number 5 zipper pulls. I'll be using just regular white zipper tape. I have my 2 rectangle rings, which is what I'm going to use to attach my strap, because I will not be using the swivel clasp on mine. A strap adjuster. I am putting a magnetic snap on the back of my slip pocket on the exterior side, so I have a really thin magnetic snap. These can be found in my website. All of the hardware can be found in my website. So let's move on to getting the connectors done. Also, I just wanted to point out that I am using waterproof canvas for my binding. This is a binding bag. So I am just going to be using this waterproof canvas. All I need to do is just fold it in half and just makes it nice and easy. Don't have to worry about any fraying. So let's move on to the first step in the pattern, which would be top stitching our connectors. Okay, so I have my lower connector right here, and what we are going to do is we are going to draw a line down the center. And for mine, I am using, since I'm using a 1-inch hardware, I did alter this to 1 inch. I think the pattern calls for a 3/4 of an inch hardware, so instead of cutting it at the 1.5, I cut it at 2 inches. So I'm going to draw my centers on my lower connectors right here. I'm just going to center it right on that 1 inch, and then we are going to top stitch this down the center, or we're going to top stitch this at, let me double check, 1/4 inch for the lower connectors. If you're doing the strap, you're gonna do the same exact thing. You're gonna find your centers and we're gonna fold them in, and you'll make your strap according to the pattern, which is a basic way of making straps. So I'm gonna grab some double-sided tape. I'm using double-sided tape from Whack, and I'm just gonna add it to my edges right here. I'm gonna do the same thing to my other side. And the way you're doing your lower connectors is the same exact way that you'll do your back connectors along with your strap. So with this one here, we're going to get the raw edges and we're gonna line them up to this line here. If you are doing a strap, you will line up to the center and then fold it again so that you don't have any raw edges. And that is just for the strap. But for the lower connectors, these are going to be attached to the bag, so you're not going to see that raw edge where they connect. So I am just going to just line it up to that center line that you made. Now, I'm sorry if you can hear my kids screaming. They're up early today. It seems that every time that I decide to record a video is the time they want to be super loud. So I did not skive my lower connector, and the main reason for that is my skiver was just giving me a fit. For some reason, it did not like skiving this leather. I think it might just have been a little too thin for it. I found that my skiver can be a bit dramatic. It's very picky. So... and temperamental. So I did not feel like fighting with it. So I just left the connectors, because what I'm gonna do is I'm just going to use this little roller that I have, and I'm gonna push down these edges here to help. And then if you really want to, you can get like a scrap piece, and then you can just hammer the edges to make it thinner if you need to. I don't know if you can see, but just right here. So that is what I am going to do real quickly, but I have a bigger hammer somewhere that I guess it's walked away. So I'm just gonna hammer this just to kind of get these edges down. Just being really careful not to So now what we're going to do is we're going to top stitch this at 1/4 inch. And I am using my Thor 1541S. And I am using Tech 70 thread from Sunny Sewing. That tends to be my favorite place. Well, it's the only place I buy my thread from. So real quickly, we're just going to top stitch this at that 1/4 inch on one side, and then you're going to do 1/4 inch on the other side. I'm going to zoom y'all in so y'all can see what I'm doing so we're not so far away. So just a 1/4 inch on that side right here. I just do a little reinforcement stitch just to hold it in place. And then we're going to do the same thing, go back at a 1/4 inch. And this is for the lower connector. If you are doing the strap, you're going to top stitch at 1/8 inch all the way around for your strap. And this is just for the lower connector and the side connectors. So there we go. Okay, so after we've done our lower connectors, we're going to move on to the next step. So because I'm not doing the back side connectors, we can just move to step 18, which is putting the exterior pocket lining together. So I'm going to grab my exterior pocket piece, which is in leather, and my so just going to line these up right sides together. Like so. And then we're going to stitch this down at 3/8 inch. I'm just going to turn my stitch length down from a top stitching length. And we are going to stitch this at 3/8 inch. Okay. I'm just adjusting my tension just because I was sewing a leather bag, a full leather bag, and I adjusted my tension. I just want to get it back to feeding correctly. Okay. so now we are going to fold open the exterior pocket lining. And we're going to top stitch along here at 1/8 of an inch. So I'm just keeping my stitch length the same. Okay, so now that it's top stitch, we are going to fold this over. And you want to line up the bottom panels or the bottom edges of your pocket. Oh, sorry. Actually, go ahead and mark out 5/8 of an inch, or I like to mark out 5/8 of an inch just within this little seam allowance right here, because that is where you're going to end up folding your piece. So you're going to fold this down here just to that 5/8 of an inch mark from the bottom edge. Gonna do the same thing to this side, and we're going to top stitch this. Just make sure it's all nice and even, like so. And we're going to top stitch this at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. So just top stitch this right along, and I'm going to adjust my stitch length again. I like to top stitch. I like my stitch length for my top stitching to be at a 5. I like a longer stitch length than my typical stitch. So now that that's done, so look like this. And now you're going to turn it so that it's right sides together. And you are going to clip at the bottom edge. And you're going to sew this at 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. And then we're going to turn it right sides out. So I'm going to adjust my stitch length, making sure I back stitch. All right. And there we go. This is what your pocket should look like. And I'm actually going to trim just my leather layer so that it's not so bulky. Just because I was not really able to skive the edges on the pocket here. So I'm going to, right here at the bottom, let me see. No, it should actually be good. It is skived, so I'm wondering, I must not be folding it correctly. Let's try that again. So just going to turn this. I'm going to get my roller and I'm going to go ahead and really roll down these seams so that they want to lay a little bit flatter. There we go. And if you need to, you can hammer it down. That will help keep this bulk down as well. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to grab one of your exterior main panels. I'm going to grab one of my exterior main panels. Let me just zoom y'all out a bit. And we're going to measure a 1/2 inch up from the bottom edge. And I'm just going to find my centers real quickly. So we're going to go a 1/2 inch up. And what I like to do is I actually like to mark out this spot right here. So you can use a chalk pen or you can use a leather marking pen. I'm going to see if a chalk pen will work. And I'll just kind of go just along the edge a little bit. Just along that edge right there. That way I know where to clip my piece at. So you're just going to line it up to the edge here. And you're going to clip. I'm going to do the same thing to my other side. Just adding some clips, and then we can double check to make sure that it's still at that 1/2 inch. Okay. So now we're going to top stitch right here at the bottom, along the bottom edge, at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. So I just really want to make sure that I press this down because I do have that extra bulk. So I'm going to go slow. I'm going to move my stitch length up to a 5. I'm going to make my way down. Making sure everything stays nice and aligned. There we go. I'm gonna go. So it should be top stitch just like this at that 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Now we're going to baste the sides here. I'm just going to baste it at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. I'm going to put my stitch length back down to a 4. Just want to make sure everything stays nice and aligned. And then I'm just going to back stitch right here. And we're going to cut some of this off right here, so I'm not too worried. I just want to make sure that it is somewhat attached and it's still within the seam allowance right here. So now we're going to do the same thing here. Okay. So. You're gonna want to grab your scissors and we're just going to trim off this excess right here. Just want to line it up. Like so. So your exterior slip pocket is done, and I just realized I forgot to put the magnetic snap like I wanted to, which is okay because we can still add it in. So I'm gonna real quickly just grab my seam ripper. And I'm just going to rip out some of these seams right here. On the side. So I know, luckily, that I marked my center, so it'll be easy to add this in. So I'm just going to let me see. I want to double check this marking here. Okay. Grab my marking pen. Okay, so I did forget to add my magnetic snap, which, that's okay. It happens. I'm just gonna leave it. should be fine. Actually, I'm going to add something else. I'm just going to add a snap. That will just be a tad bit easier. Here we go. So I just want to make sure this is nice and even. Grab one of my marking pens, if I can find one. Okay. So, move y'all in a bit. Okay. Okay, so I'm going about a 1/2 inch down. About 5/8 of an inch down from the top here is where I'm going. And now I'm just going to be super careful that I don't go through these stitching right here. I'm gonna go a little bit up. I'm just gonna go slightly up, probably about 1/8 of an inch, because then I'm not gonna hit that lip. I'll be hitting right on the it should be good. Okay, I'm just gonna mark. I'm gonna go right where I marked. Okay, perfect. Didn't hit the stitching. So now I just want to add in so I'm just going to get my things to set it. I'm gonna go grab my hammer. Okay. And I'm just gonna make sure that everything is nice and aligned. I'm just gonna set my snap in. Okay, sorry, so I'm going to continue just hitting that in until it's nice and oops, added in. So there is my first part. And now we can go ahead and add the second part of the line snap. So I'm just gonna add it in. Just doing the same thing. Just making sure it's nice and okay. And then you can just snap it in. I'm gonna one more time hit this so that I know it's in there nice and okay. So there we go. I have my line snap. So now the pocket won't open if we have like a phone or something in there. You can close it and it won't open up. Because if it wasn't and I have my phone in there, because I didn't interface this pocket, it would open up. So I'm glad that I ended up doing that. So after that, we can move on to our next step. So now that we have finished our back slip pocket, we are going to move on to our gusset. So you're going to want to grab your gusset piece along with your connector or your lower connector. And 2 of your D-rings. I am using a 1-inch, since my webbing is 1 inch, I adjusted this to be, I adjusted the lower connector to 2 inches so that I could use it for a 1 inch. The pattern calls for 3/4 of an inch, I believe. So that is why mine probably looks a little bit bigger. So I'm just going to grab our D-rings. I'm actually using rectangle rings because mine's not going to be where it can come off. It's just going to be a crossbody. So I have my rectangle rings instead of the D-rings. So for this part here, we are going to run some double-sided tape along the wrong side of our DST. So it's going to be the side where you have that raw edge is butting up together. Okay, so we are going to add that double-sided tape approximately 2 inches away from the short edge. And so what I like to do is I'll just get my marking pen and I will mark out that 2 inches. Approximately, doesn't need to be super perfect, just in the general area. Then you're going to want to grab that double-sided tape and run it along. I'm going to use a 1/2 inch. This will just help hold my piece in since I am using a larger lower connector. So with that, we're going to remove the paper from the double-sided tape. So I just like to take off the edge right here because we're going to add in these rectangle rings. And with the rectangle rings, I like to make sure that the little weld part here, sorry, right here that's welded, is gonna be hidden when I fold this over. And we're gonna fold over each one by 1.5 inches. So what I'm actually gonna do is I'm gonna come over here. I'm gonna go to 3 inches. Let's see. So 1.5. Yeah, 3 inches. Be 1.5, and I'm just gonna mark that so that way I have a idea on where I'm supposed to put where I'm supposed to fold this to. Okay, so add in your rectangle rings, and then I'm just gonna fold to that 3-inch line that I marked. That will make my connector fold over at 1.5 inches. Then you're gonna wanna grab double-sided tape and just add it right there. And I'm just going to take off that piece and then just fold up that piece there. Now we're gonna do the same exact thing to our other side. I'm gonna pull that piece down a little bit. Fold my connector to that 3-inch line. Add my double-sided tape. So you just wanna keep it about 1/2 inch away from the D-ring, or the rectangle ring, sorry. So I'm going to pull that off and just add it back up for now. I'm going to align this center, so I think mine is going to be, since it is about 1/4 inch bigger. Let's see, not 1/4 inch, it is, oh yeah, 1/4 inch, because I think it's 3/4, and I'm using a 1 inch. So I'm just measuring this out to see where. So my center for this is I'm gonna find my center first of my piece. So just fold this together. So I'm gonna find my center. I'm gonna do the same thing to my other side. Find my centers. Okay, and now I'm going to just so let's see. So we're gonna do 1.5. Oh no, sorry. 1 3/8. So I'm actually going to add 1/8 of an inch to that. So 1 3/8. So I'm going to 1.5 for me. That should have, it should be centered at that point. So let's see. Should be at 1.5. Just make sure it's nice and even. 1 3/8, 1 3/8. Okay, it looks like 1 3/8 is going to be where it needs to be to make it even on both sides. Now I'm just going to see what I need for this to be even on this side. Approximately about 1 inch away from each end. So I'm going to put 1 inch for here and 1 inch right here. So that looks good. And then I'm just going to take off my tape, making sure everything aligns. And then I'm going to double check to make sure we're still at that 1 inch on each side. And we are. So it's nice and even down the center. And that double-sided tape is going to hold that in, and we're going to top stitch along the edge here at 1/8 of an inch. So we're going to keep our tails long so that we can pull our thread through. Okay. I'm going to walk this down, making sure I stay close to that edge. Going to adjust my foot. Okay, we're gonna go right back down that 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay. I'm going to go back down, and then we're going to just kind of keep an eye on your strings to make sure they don't get caught under your machine. When you get close, just go slow. And you're going to pull out that so that your tails are long. Just go on this side and you'll pull through. So just pull these up. When you pull, it'll pull out these bottom threads here. And you can pull through the threads from the other side. And now we're just going to tie them together. I like to tie it about 5 times. Keep them a bit long. And then I will just run some heat over it, and then I'm going to add a piece of double-sided tape on top of it, just like that, and I'm going to leave it. And that piece should look like this. And now we're going to add a rivet in. I'm just going to eyeball it. Just make sure you don't get your stitching. There we go. For me, I'm going to have to use a really long, a large I'm gonna have to use a large one just because that's all I have. My let's see if this post will fit in here. Whoops. Okay. I'm going to use these long ones because my leather is quite thick. So I'm going to do the same for my other side. And I'm going to set my rivets in. Okay, so my rivets are set on my connectors, lower connectors. So now we can go ahead and move on to our zipper panel. I'm gonna go ahead and cut my zipper tape. I tend to cut my zipper tape when I get to it. I don't cut it beforehand. And I cut it a tad bit longer than what it needs to be. I'm going to heat seal my edges on my zipper here. Okay. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to put my zipper on to my, I'm actually going to iron my zipper so that it's not so wonky. So I'm going to go and iron my zipper so it's nice and straight. Okay, so I have ironed my zipper. And now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to baste this on real quickly. So my zipper is longer than what the instructions have you do, just because it just makes it a little bit easier. Also, I'm not going to put my zipper ends on until the very end. It just kind of helps keep it out of the way. We're going to stitch this on, or just baste this on with the 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay. So that is on. Now we're going to add the second piece, our lining piece. So I'm actually going to clip this on here. Okay. So now I'm going to stitch this on 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, as close as I can get to my zipper. Okay, so now that that is on, we're going to fold this over and we're going to top stitch this at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. So I'm just going to trim off this excess here. I'm going to put my stitch length to a longer stitch length. Turn it to a 5 is what I like to have it at. I'm just going to make sure that everything is nice and lined up. So, add a few clips. Okay. Okay. So we have one side done. Let's go ahead and do our other side. I'm going to go ahead and add my lining on as well. Okay. Okay. So, same thing. Stitch this on with a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, or as close as you can get to that zipper. Okay. Same thing that we did to the other side. We're going to open this up and top stitch it. Okay, and like I said, just top stitch this at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Now we're going to pop on our zipper. So I'm just going to grab my zipper jig real quickly so that I can add it on. Just got to unscrew it so that it fits on my desk. Okay. I am using these two zippers right here. I'm going to go ahead one. I'm going to redo that one because it's a slight bubble and I prefer okay, much better. So, we have our zippers on, and now we're going to grab the gusset. I'm just going to double check to make sure this is cut correctly. Oops, yep. Okay, so I'm going to go back and cut a new gusset because I cut it an inch short. So I'll be right back. Okay, so now it should be the correct size. Yes, perfect. So I'm going to just push down my rectangle ring and I'm going to match up my edges here. And we're going to stitch this on with a 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. Just going to baste this together. I'm going to grab my gusset and I'm just going to go ahead and add it on instead of basting. Whoops. Make sure that it's on the right way. So you want your right sides of your leathers to be touching and you want the wrong side of your you want the wrong side of your lining to be touched, or the right side of your linings to be touching. So you're just going to make sure everything is nice and straight. Okay, and we're gonna stitch this at 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. So I'm gonna put my stitch length, make sure it's not at a top stitching length. And I'm gonna stitch this at 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Making sure you back stitch at the beginning and end. Okay. Now you're going to want to open this up and top stitch that along the edge, making sure everything is nice and even. So you're going to want to top stitch right here. Let me go ahead and move y'all up. I'm going to put my stitch length back to a 5. Okay. So there we go. So you have that side done. Now you're just going to flip it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to trim this a little bit just so it's out of the way. You can trim it even if you want. So I'm going to do the same thing where I add my clips. You're going to grab your panel. So you have your panels just like this. And we just put the gusset to the zipper, right sides together. And this is the exterior, so we're gonna get the lining and we're just gonna right sides touching to your lining gusset. Clip that into place. And we're gonna stitch this at 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. I'm just gonna go back because I went back just to reinforce those stitches because I forgot to change my stitch length back to a smaller stitch length. I had my top stitching length, so I just wanted to make sure that everything was gonna sit nicely together. So now if you look at this, it should be like so, and we are going to open this up here and we're going to top stitch this. So just want to make sure everything sits together nicely. I'm going to top stitch this, and I put my stitch length back to that long stitch length. And now I want to go around my lining here to help hold it in place. So I'm going to base this around at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. All the way around. Making sure I pull this nice and tight so that it sits together nicely. Everything is all nice and together. So we are going to set our gusset aside. And now we're going to move on to the lining part. So for mine, I did mine a little bit differently. I'm not doing the zipper pockets or the, I'm not doing the zipper pocket or the slip pocket. So what I am doing, I'm not doing the zippered slip pocket or the card slots. I am adding a different kind of slip pocket in. This is just a piece that was cut to about like 11 inches, and I'm going to fold it in half, and then I'm going to top stitch this. At 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, all the way around, or not all the way around. Well, you could go all the way around if you wanted to. Okay. So I'm just going to crease my centers here, and I'm actually going to go ahead and snip my centers on my this main panel or lining panel. Okay. So I'm just going to line up these center creases right here. And I'm just going to baste around here at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. So now that that is done, I can just trim off this excess here. Even with the panel. So you can see where there's some extra. So I'm just cutting that off. There we go. And I can see the crease line here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and top stitch right down the middle to create a pocket. Actually, yeah. I'm going to go over slightly, and then I'm going to come back down the other side. All right. Oops. All right, so slip pocket, real simple. So now grab your exterior, and I'm gonna grab my front pocket, or my front piece, and I'm going to go ahead and mark my centers again, or snip my centers. Okay, perfect. I'm going to place my nameplate. I'm going to go about an inch down. Yeah, I'm going to about an inch down. That's good. So I'm going to center this. Okay, can add in my plate. Gonna add duct tape to my piece. And now I'm just going to baste this piece here, which is the back panel. I made it slightly larger than the, I made it slightly larger. Actually, I'm gonna go ahead, I'm gonna switch that. Since I have this pocket here, this will be my back, and this will be my front. That way I don't have two like slip pockets in the front, or two pockets on the back to make it heavier, put a lot of weight on the. So I'm gonna base this around. Gonna add some clips just to hold it in place. All right. So I have this piece basted on. I'm gonna do the same thing to my other side. And then I'm gonna trim this down so that it's nice and even. Okay, so that is basted on. Now we can trim this down. So there we go. Also with this piece, you want to make sure that when you are basting this, that you make sure that this is the right side, because I know that when I made my first bag, I did it upside down and I had to switch the way that my nameplate went. So just be aware of what way you're putting the zipper pocket or the card slots. So there is our two exterior pieces, and now we get to the fun part, which is putting on our exterior or our gusset. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to clip my pieces. I'm lining them up, making sure that these here are even, because I want to find my centers. So I'm doing the same thing to the other side. Okay. Whoops. And now I'm going to do the same thing for my bottom exterior. It's going to be a little bit trickier just because the connector is a little bit bulky, but shouldn't be too hard. Just have to make sure everything is nice and straight. So I got my centers marked out. I have my centers marked out on my exterior along with my on my exterior front and my exterior back. So we're gonna start with the back of the exterior. I'm going to turn my gusset wrong side out so the lining is facing out. And I'm going to match up my centers and clip on both sides. So I'm going to place a clip on either sides of where my center is just to hold it in place so it doesn't accidentally shift. And I'm going to do the same thing to my other side. And then I'm going to just make my way around, lining up these edges here. I'm just easing in my gusset. So my gusset is in, and this here is what I find to be quite important. I am going to put some staples onto my pieces to hold it in so that it does not shift when I go to stitch it. So I'm just going to grab my stapler and I'm going to put it right within my seam allowance. The seam allowance is going to be 1/4 of an inch. And then I have this leather hole punch I'm going to use just to make sure that I can get it through this big bulk here. I'm gonna really make sure, press it all the way through. There we go. Gonna do the same for the other side. Like I said, I'm just making sure that it's right within the seam allowance. Then I'm gonna baste it. So I'm just making sure here I see that 1/8 of an inch where I basted it together when I was when I basted my gussets together. So I just want to make sure that I am putting it within that, not going past it. So now this is all nice and stapled. I'm going to add some more staples to my larger, because there is one spot I want to make sure that I get. So where is it? Right here. Okay, and now you just want to get your pliers and just make sure that everything is pushed down. That the prongs are not sticking out so that you don't scratch up your machine. Now we can close this or base this on with that 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. Gonna move these extra I'm just gonna base this with a 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. Be really careful you don't hit any of those staples. I like to keep my pliers near me just in case, because with these thicker more heavy duty staples, they're a lot larger, so sometimes they can be a little stubborn going underneath the foot of the machine. Okay, so now that that is done, I'm going to pull out my staples. Okay, so now that I have all of the staples out. I'm going to make sure that these go into my trash can so I don't step on them. Okay. So, there we go. We have our back on. Let's add the binding. So, like I said, for my binding, I am using waterproof canvas. So what I want to do is I want to trim off these excess like threads. I want to make sure that there's nothing. And then I want to just trim anything that might be just a little bit off. Looks good to me. Okay, so you're gonna want to get your waterproof canvas, and I'm going to go to my iron and I'm going to fold this in half and iron it so that it has a crease in it. Okay, so now that I have ironed my binding, I'm going to add it to my panel, and I'm going to just add it to the top is where I like to start. So I'm just going to clip it around. Like so. So we're just going to continue clipping this all the way around. Okay, so now that this is clipped, we are going to go ahead and stitch this on at 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Binding. Just kind of, I like to just poke through. And kind of just make sure there's no puckering down there, and it looks really, really nice. So now we can move on to the other side of our exterior. So I'm going to do the same thing, just going to add clips to both sides and ease in this gusset. Okay, so now that we have clipped this, I'm going to go ahead and staple the outside within the seam allowance just like we did on the other side. Okay, so now that that has been stapled on, I'm going to grab my pliers real quick, and there's just a couple that I want to really make sure I get down. Okay, so I'm going to stitch this on with that 1/4 inch seam allowance like we did on the other side. So just going to start at the top and make my way around at that 1/4 inch seam allowance, making sure I backstitch at the beginning and end. Okay, so now that we have clipped or based the gusset on at that 1/4 inch seam allowance, we're going to take out all of the staples. Okay, so now that we are finished with this, we're going to make sure that we throw away our staples. And I just kind of like to go over this, make sure that everything is nice and even. Check on the inside of my bag to make sure that I caught everything. It looks good to me. So I'm going to go ahead and we're going to do the same thing that we did previously. I'm going to make sure all the excess thread is out of the way so that it doesn't peek out from underneath my waterproof canvas. I'm going to start at the top and I am going to just clip all the way around. Okay, so now that's clipped, I'm going to put my gusset side up, my zipper panel, and we're going to stitch this at 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, just like we did on this side of the binding. Okay, so now that that is binded, we're going to turn this right sides out and see how we did. There we go. This is so pretty. I love the gold with this baby blue. Look at that. So pretty. Okay, so now our last thing is we're going to get our webbing here. And this part is going to be super quick. First thing we're going to do is we're going to add our adjuster on. So first I want to make sure that my edges here are heat sealed so it doesn't fray. There we go. I like to fold and then fold again for my strap. And I'm going to actually going to pull it down just a little bit longer because I want to do kind of like a box stitch. I'm going to do a stitch I'm just going to do a stitch right up at the top here, and then I will rivet it. Actually, I'm going to do it closer to the end, and then I'll rivet closer to the top. And I'm going to keep my stitch length at a regular size. Okay. And now I will rivet it. I'm just going to grab my hole punch here. So I'm just adding a hole, and I'm going to heat seal that so I don't have to worry about it unraveling. So I'm just going to grab me some medium rivets here. Add it through. I'm really making sure that my webbing is sealed. So there we go. I'm going to set that into place. And now, typically when you're doing a strap, you'll put your swivel clasp in. But since I'm not using a swivel clasp, I'm going to add it into one of my rectangle rings. So I'm going to add it in, making sure it's up, that my strap is up, it's not twisted. Sorry, making sure. Okay, so I'm making sure that my strap is up. Now, Sorry, you want to go through the other way. Go through just like this, and then you'll add it through the bottom, like so. Making sure it's all nice and even. You don't want it to be crooked. Okay, sorry, you want to make sure that it's nice and even because I didn't. It was all twisted. And now it's through, so it's adjustable at this point. And you're just going to loop your strap through here, fold it like we did before, and we're going to stitch at the bottom just like we did on the other side. So I'm just trying to find a way that I can stick this under my foot. It's okay to squish your bag a little bit. Okay. So now we can just stitch that along the bottom like we did on the other side. Gonna do that one more time. Just really want to make sure that it is attached nicely, nice and secured. Okay, perfect. Now, I'm going to trim this up and I'm going to heat set my threads right here. Okay, looks good. And now I'm gonna just do the same thing I did on the other side. I'm gonna add my rivet. Just like before, I'm going to run my lighter through this to get some of this. Make sure it doesn't continue fraying. Be careful because you don't want to accidentally burn yourself if you get the rivet too hot. So now I'm going to set my rivet. And there we go. That is the finished bag. So now, since we squished it down a little bit whenever we were putting, attaching that side, you just want to make sure that you go back in and you put it, you push out those edges here, and then also stuff the bag so that it can form its shape. So pretty. I love the way it looks. So I will have finished photos at the end of this video. And that is the Catalina. Like I said, this one is a simple one that is modified, obviously. It does not have the card slots or the zipper pocket, but this is a nice, quick gift to make if you omit the extra stuff. So, yes, beautiful. Thank you so much. If you have any questions, comment below, and I will try to get them answered. If you want, you can also join my Facebook group, Casting Handcrafted, which will be linked below, where you can learn all about sew fuse and ask any questions that you need for bag making. So, thank you, everyone. Bye.